Ontario, the City of Toronto Enactment, Article 125. The City of Toronto is hereby continued as a body corporate that is composed of the inhabitants of its geographic area. As we can see, Toronto, the City of Toronto, is considered a corporation in law. It's a corporate body carrying on business. Further to that, if you live in Toronto, if you're an inhabitant of the City of Toronto, then you are considered to be incorporated into the corporation. This is the operation of law that they are using against us. In the statutory power itself, in Article 125, it declares or brings forth the operation of law that we are considered, the inhabitants are considered to be incorporated into the corporation. City of Toronto Enactment, Article 133, subsection 1. It is the role of the mayor of the city, as the head of the council, to act as chief executive officer of the city. We have come to see that Canada is considered a corporate body in law. They are a corporation, a body corporate. Now, the Constitution Act of Canada 1867, Articles 9 to 12, brings forth the executive powers of this corporate body. And we see more specifically in Article 9, it states that the chief executive officer of this corporation is the Governor General, but the head of the state or the controlling power belongs to the Queen. So technically, she's the chief executive officer of the corporate body, and she transfers her powers to the Governor General. Now, when you look into the City of Toronto, we note and we find that Toronto is also considered a body corporate in law, in Section 125 of the statutory power. Now, in Section 133 of that statutory power, it teaches us that the mayor is the chief executive officer of that body corporate. So in law, the operation of law says that the mayor of Toronto, he or she is the one who is the chief executive officer, thereby responsible for the actions of the body corporate. Remember, in Quebec Civil Code, it teaches us about contract law and about operations of law, and it clearly states to us that the executive officer of the corporation can be held accountable for their actions and their officers' actions. So any officers who enforce bylaws or regulations on behalf of the corporate body who are limiting and abridging your rights, well, technically, through their own statutory power, it's the mayor who's responsible, because she is the chief executive officer, and by law she's giving the okay down the line for them to do their actions. City of Toronto Enactment, Article 148, subsection 1. Without limiting Sections 7 and 8, those sections authorize the city to do the following things in accordance with such conditions and restrictions as may be prescribed: to establish corporations, to nominate or authorize a person to act as an incorporator, director, officer, or member of a corporation, to exercise any power as a member of a corporation. Black Laws, 7th edition. Nomination. The act of proposing a person for election or appointment. The act of naming or designating a person for a position. Black Laws, 7th edition. Authorize. To give legal authority. To empower. He authorized the employee to act for him. To formally approve or to sanction. The city authorized the construction project. Authorization. Black Laws, 7th edition. Acting officer. 1. Performing the duties of an office, usually temporarily, but who has no claim of title to the office. Through Section 125 of the City of Toronto's enactment, we understand that Toronto means a corporate body, a corporation in law, and that the inhabitants have been incorporated thereof. Then we saw how it was the mayor who's considered the chief executive officer of this corporate body. Now we understand that from section 125, where it says the inhabitants have been incorporated or make up the body corporate. Let's look a little bit deeper and to see exactly where in this statutory power the right is given to the city to convert us from our full legal capacity as men and women unto a class of person designated the officer of the corporate body. So in section 148, okay, it says that the city can nominate or authorize a person to act as an officer of the or member of the corporation. So that's where the statutory power is placing the limitation or abridgment upon us. They're saying that the city has the authority to nominate or just to authorize us to act as an officer of the corporation. And in doing so, we are considered an acting officer of that corporate body. And therefore, when we operate as an acting officer, we become accountable to the bylaws, to the rules and regulations of the corporate body. If we stayed in our full legal capacity, then we have no obligations to the corporate body. But through section 148, they nominate us, they designate us as an officer of the corporation, and therefore now the liability rests upon us as that class of person to fulfill the obligations and the duties to the bylaws that they create. City of Toronto Enactment, Article 366, Subsection 1. The city may pass bylaws providing that a person who contravenes a bylaw of the city passed under this act is guilty of an offense. The City of Toronto Enactment, Article 366. It says the city, the corporation, may pass bylaws providing that a person who contravenes a bylaw of the city is guilty of an offense. So they say we have a set of rules and regulations that govern the actions of the persons within our body corporate. And if you fail to respect and perform your duties towards these bylaws, then you're guilty of an offense. And through our enactment, we're going to penalize you. We're going to fine you if you don't have your dog license, if you don't have your building permit, if you don't have your shed permit, we're going to fine you because you're breaking the bylaws of our corporate body. But all this is a limitation and an abridgment of our full legal capacity. We don't have to take on the role of an officer of a corporate body. They cannot force us to play that role, that designation in law. That's an abridgment of our fundamental rights and freedoms as found in Section 7 of the Constitution Act of Canada 1982 and Section 26. We have the right to enter into recognition as a class of person. We have the right to play the role of officer, not to be forced to play the role of officer. Just because the city council or the executive powers of the corporate body decided to nominate us and confer upon us or give authorization to us to be considered an officer or a member of the body corporate, thereby linking the accountability, the responsibility, the obligation upon us as a class of person to obey their laws, it doesn't mean I'm bound by that. It doesn't mean I have to listen to that. That limits and abridges my fundamental rights and freedoms. I don't want to be part of your corporate body. I don't want to be subjected to your internal rules that govern your private corporation. Therefore, leave me alone, or I'll launch a suit against you under the supreme powers of the court, under the inherent jurisdiction of the court, seeking the administration of justice, saying that your statutory power is limiting and abridging my rights. You're claiming in Article 125 that you are a corporate body, and you're claiming that I, as an inhabitant of the territory, have now been incorporated into your corporate body. You're claiming further in Article 148 of the statutory power that you have the right to nominate me and you have the right to confer upon me a designation of officer of your corporation without my consent. That's garbage. You don't have the right to do that. That's like me walking around out there on the street looking at people and say, hey, you know what? Today I'm going to call you Mickey Mouse. I confer upon you the designation of Mickey Mouse, and you've got no say about it. Every time I see you now, I'm going to call you Mickey Mouse, and I'm going to treat you like Mickey Mouse. The individual will tell me, hey, Charlie, take this and go your way. You're not going to do that to me. My name is Bob, or my name is Mike. Don't call me Mickey Mouse. Well, that's the same thing they're trying to do to us. They're saying, well, you're an officer of the corporation. We designate you that, and that's the capacity, that's the role that you have to function under. And no, I don't. I can function under my full legal capacity. My rights existed long before the dominion of the state, long before Canada or this municipality came into existence. And because you guys decided to pass a law, a statutory power, that tried to limit and abridge my fundamental rights and freedoms, doesn't mean I have to accept it. Doesn't mean I have to stand under that.
City of Toronto Enactment, Article 8.2. The city may pass bylaws respecting the following matters: governance structure of the city and its local boards, accountability and transparency of the city and its operations and of its local boards, financial management of the city and its local boards, public asset of the city acquired for the purpose of exercising its authority under this or any other act, economic, social, and environmental well-being of the city, health, safety, and well-being of persons, services and things that the city is authorized to provide under subsection 1, protection of persons and property, including consumer protection, animals, structures, including fences and signs, and business licenses.
We're standing under our full legal capacity as men and women. And then along comes a statutory power, and it designates us as officers of the corporate body. And this officer is a class of being, and it's controlled by enactments now. They apply the bylaws against the officers, and they act as administrators of that corporate body, claiming that we, as the class of being, owe the obligation or the duty to the enactment. That's what they're doing to us, the operation of law they're using against us. Now, their statutory power removes our full legal capacity. Why? Very simply, they force us into the class, or they force us into the designation as officers of their corporate body when it's our choice. Our full legal capacity, our fundamental rights and freedoms allows us to decide if we will play that role or enter into recognition as that class of person. Not that you should force me because you claim that the legislator created a law, and now there's a law, an enactment that claims that there's this operation going on where the inhabitants are incorporated, and you're designating us officers of the corporate body and then saying we owe a duty to the bylaws. It's ridiculous when you really understand what's transpiring. Because if they didn't do this to you, if they didn't render you a class of being, designate you as an officer, and then try and apply the bylaws, they have no standing. There's nothing they can do. But they trick you in law. They approach you, they treat you, they designate you, they deem you, they see you as that class of being, that officer of the corporate body. And to them, great, I have power to control you. Now the statutory power says such and such, our bylaws say such and such, you owe the obligation. Oh, you don't want to fulfill your obligation and duty to the bylaws? Then we'll fine you and we'll penalize you.
Ontario Land Titles Enactment, Article 31, Subsection 2. No consent required. For the purpose of an application under Subsection 1, when you're registering your land or registering the home that you purchased, the municipality shall be deemed to be the agent of the owners and other persons having interest in the land designated in the bylaw, and it is not necessary to obtain the consent of such owners and other persons to the application.
The statutory power renders their municipality a corporate body. Further, through their statutory power, they render or designate the inhabitants of the territory as officers of that corporate body. Now when you jump into the land titles enactment, if you and I as men and women purchase a piece of property, for example a piece of land, or if we purchase a home, when we go to buy a home, we have to register this with the land titles registry. When we look into that enactment, we find in Article 31, subsection 2, the following. It says, when we go to register our property, the municipality is deemed to be our agent. And no consent is required for the municipality to operate as our agent during this registration process. Now, if you're wondering what actually transpires, is that they take away absolute title from you as first ownership to the property that you are purchasing, and they return to you a qualified title. And they do that through this operation of law, because they claim that you're their officer and they're operating as agent on your behalf, and no consent is required on your behalf for them to do this to you. So it starts in that incorporation of the City of Toronto, where they're making us part of the body corporate, and then it expands itself outwards to other enactments. And here we're just seeing one operation of law that is brought forth. We go to register our land, we go to register our home, we say, hey, I just purchased a property, I want to register this land. The municipality jumps in, says, I'm operating as an agent for this individual. I don't have to have consent on behalf of that individual. Why? Because they're an officer of our corporate body, and we're the executive powers, and we don't need their permission. And now what I'm doing is I'm registering our body as absolute title holder to this property, and we're giving to them or returning to them a qualified title.
Looking into the Criminal Code of Canada, the definition of municipality. Municipality includes the corporation of a city, town, village, county, township, parish, or other territorial or local division of a province, the inhabitants of which are incorporated or are entitled to hold property collectively for a public purpose.
We saw how the statutory power, the City Toronto enactment, incorporated us, and you've seen in my other videos how they have incorporated us into their corporate body. Now the Criminal Code of Canada says the same thing when you look at the definition of municipality. It says the inhabitants are incorporated. So here we go, two witnesses in law. You have statutory power and the Criminal Code of Canada stating that the inhabitants of an area of a municipality are incorporated into the body corporate. Now also our property is now under the administration of the executive powers of that corporation. You see, in the Criminal Code of Canada, it states that we are entitled. It doesn't say we have to. It says the inhabitants are entitled to hold property collectively, and if you do so, then it becomes under the administration of the executive powers of the local government. But if you choose to exercise your fundamental right and say, listen, I don't want to hold my property in association with others. Why? I'm not part of the body corporate. I'm not an officer of the corporation. Thereby you can't force me to hold my property in association with you. I'm holding it alone. Then your full legal capacity jumps out again. But that's not what they're doing. The legislators again have used the words on pieces of paper to strip us of our fundamental rights and freedoms. Why do you think they defined municipality the way they did in the Criminal Code of Canada? Because they knew, when they look at the very definition of a municipality, to them they understand, oh, a municipality is a corporate body in law, and the inhabitants of that area have been incorporated into this corporate body. That's why it clearly comes out in the Criminal Code of Canada. The inhabitants of a town, township, parish, municipality, and the like are incorporated, have been incorporated. We are a body corporate. It's really important to get that through your head. Why? Because that's their key to taking away your fundamental rights and freedoms. That's their key to taking away your full legal capacity. They're getting you to operate as a class of being, a statutory creature, controlled by enactments and regulations, and then they're treating you in that capacity. And they're never telling you, hang on, you have another capacity that doesn't force you to play this role of being a class of being, of being a class of person. You can stand under your full legal capacity, and then I don't have the power or the ability to regulate you, to rule, and to restrict you. They were supposed to teach us. They provided us education. When we were young and we grew up, they said to our parents, you have to send them for an education, or you have to send her for an education. They must go to school. Well, when we went to school, they never taught us of our fundamental rights and freedoms. They never taught us about human rights, natural rights, charter rights, international law, anything like that. And okay, I can understand in grade 5 or grade 6, you're not going to be taught a whole bunch of operations of law, but they should have taught us. They had the responsibility. International law says that the promotion of human rights and fundamental freedoms was primary and the first reason for education. And then secondarily for us to operate in the role or the capacity as a class of person while we pursue or gain after our own living.